Blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, who gives the Torah of truth and the good news of salvation to his people Israel, to all the people through saying Shema.
Amen, but that was not
You wanted to read that either? Right. Okay, so last week we got up to, we finished 21 after many hours of discussions, and no one wanted to carry on.
that was the wrong one.
So we're going to basically look at Revelations 22. And then, like I said, we're going to go, because Revelations 22 should take us, I said that tongue in cheek, all about 10 minutes. We were going to look at Gog and Magog. That was mentioned in Revelations 20. So we're going to touch on it in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Okay, so just to look at different timing, it was mentioned there. We didn't really go all that much into it, so I said, okay, well, let's touch on it now. So we can kind of just touch base and kind of get a little bit of a handle, at least some understanding about what this is about. Okay, so, right. When we look at Revelations 22, we're kind of looking at a summation of things that have happened. This is one part of this book that sort of just summarizes everything that's going on. You'll see it because it will mention things that have already taken place. Like I said to you, our challenge in Revelations is not that it's all out of, it's not a strict chronological book as such, but it's a timeline book. So it gives you a narrative or a specific timeline for the plagues or for the different wonders, and then it talks to you about two witnesses, and it brings little things. And I think the biggest challenge we face is overlapping the timelines within a timeline. Okay, very much like Daniel. When you look at one section, he'll give you a timeline over everything, and then he'll start talking about different chapters. Will talk about specifics within that timeline. I think Revelations does that very much the same. Okay, so with this, don't think that you're running through from 21 into 20, thinking now it's going to carry on with the same thing. It changes slightly, and like I said, it's going to change some of the stuff. All right. So basically, a summation of what's happening. Okay, so 22 verse 1. Next angel showed me the river of the water of life, sparkling like crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. All right, we mentioned that today, right? Ezekiel. Okay? Between the main street and the river was the tree of life, producing 12 kinds of fruit, a different kind for every month. And the leaves of that tree were for healing the nations. No longer will there be any curses. All right, when did the curses come in? Yeah, once they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, once everything went into brokenness. How do I know that? Well, does it say all the curses have now come into effect, or are you talking about Deuteronomy now, or are we talking about those curses? Right? Okay. We start looking at the fields were cursed. How do we know the fields were cursed in Genesis? Thorns came in. Okay, the animals? Everything they tasted death, but animals? Well, that's a picture of atonement, but wow, how do I know the animals are not the same as they've always been?
Because later on it says that will be fixed.
Often animals were pets. Looking after them.
Right, the whole dietary thing has changed, right? Lions, it says there's things of restoration. Lions weren't, we look at it now when we go, they're made perfectly for this. They can digest meat, they can digest bone. Their diet consists of, but before it wasn't the case. But we also hear about these unclean and clean animals. What's that about? God said He made everything, and it was good, and it was perfect, and it was right, and now all of a sudden we have a distinction. When did this distinction come into place? Right, everything that was perfect is no longer perfect, okay? So the fact is that the first Adam's disobedience brought death and affected the entirety of the world. Everything of creation was warped because of what took place. Okay? So now He's restoring everything as it was before. The throne of God and the throne of God and of the Lamb.
Isaiah talks of the millennium where the lion will lie with the lamb.
Everything starts to be restored, but not yet in its completion. Right, because once death is dealt with, but in the millennial reign it talks about them living for a period of time. Okay, but they're still alive. So there is still a point where death is still there, and that is also foreign dangerous. So it's the same as the pouring of the Ruach HaKodesh came out in Acts 2, as in the pointing of the new covenant, but this renewed covenant, or this new covenant that gets established, but it says, I will remember your sins no more. All of Israel will be gathered into one land. Everybody won't have to teach his neighbor about what's going on there. Those sort of things are coming in only much later. So it's the start process of same sort of procedure. Right? The throne of God and the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their forehead. Night will no longer exist. They will need neither the light of the lamp nor the light of the sun, because Adonai God will shine upon them, and they will reign as kings forever. Okay, again, so it's pointing at two interesting little references. Okay, let's go back first to Genesis. When did the sun get created? I don't know, look at your Bibles, the answer's right there. It's an open book test. That's good. Right, day 3.
The lights in the dome of the sky.
Yeah, day 2.
Day 2, day 3, day 4. You guys are doing 3 different answers.
2.
Day 3?
Day 3. Day 3. All happy? Okay, so day 3, right? But all of a sudden there's light spoken out before then, right? So where did that light come from? If the sun and that was only created at day 3. Right, okay? He was what he brought. And we see this picture again of the Shekhinah of God. Right? And then when we start looking at obviously the New Jerusalem and the different types of stones, and like I said to Uncle Tommy posted that one where we spoke about the different types of stones that once had pure light actually reflect brilliant colors. Okay? So it's an inkling of what different types of these sacred stones which we're talking about, which names change. So in our Bible, if you your Bible, it might say jasper, it might say diamond. They're not really sure because the names of the stones have changed over time. Okay, some guys, even in the same period of time, different cultures will have different names for the same stones. Okay,
Yeah,
so
just to get back to the lights on the sky,
Yes.
mine says on the 4th one. On the 3rd day, the
full of times and seasons.
This is on verse 14.
Sorry, what was that?
Verse 13 ends with, and it came to be the 3rd day, verse 14, and Elohim said, let lights come into the expanse on the 3rd day. For the appointed times, and then
No, I think
Oh,
that
Oh no,
verse
it's the
13.
4th day.
and it came to be the 4th day. And then he says, let the waters steam with
There's
living
there's no day 0. So day one was when the earth was unformed,
Yeah.
and then he made light, he divided light and darkness. And then day 2, the dome in the middle of the water was divided. And then day 3, the
waters
tree
was
was the
divided.
grass, seed producing plants.
And
then the 4th day, see that's where it gets confusing.
Yeah, the lights.
Right,
Day,
so
it's similar to the
Divide
Leviticus.
the day for night, for there will be signs, seasons, days, and years.
Yeah, so it is day 4.
And let them be lights in the sun and in the sky, and they will set the God. So the 2 great lights, the larger light to rule the day, and the smaller light to rule by night, when the stars start between the dirt and the sky, to rule over the day and over the night, and to provide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So surely there was evening and morning was the 4th day.
So it is day
Sorry, I'm
Let's stay at
still
4.
a little confused. Because it says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day,
Yes.
and the darkness night.
Because if you look
But
in
if
the
that
Bible,
is
it
the sun,
doesn't say, and then
then
it
sun,
says,
why did he
Sun.
create that light if he is that
Well,
light?
it's not in the-
Well, that's
in
part
the
of it.
season came to.
Remember, everything is created in this as he's putting things out there, right? So it's the separation of light and darkness.
Remember, he's going to be the light in the new city.
It's the same as the Shekinah. So the Shekinah that is coming down is him very much seeing that there's a separation. And yet when we see that there, again, like in menorah, that is a perpetual light, and you will see that which gives light in the Mishkan. So it's an image of who he is, it's illumination. Okay. All right, are you guys happy? Yes. Therefore. All right. Yes. Okay. So light will no longer exist because of that, right? And they will reign as kings forever and ever. Then he said to me, these words are true and trustworthy. Adonai, God of the spirits of the prophets, sent his angel to show his servants the things that must happen soon. Look, I'm coming very soon. Now you see, we start to get confusing here. Because, sorry, we were reading about you coming in the clouds and bringing your armies and judging people and reigning for a millennium, and now he's saying, look, I'm coming soon. Again, it is showing you that there is a point where he's pointing to the reed and he's saying, you've seen all these things. You might not, he probably doesn't understand what he saw in many cases. I mean, we don't even understand the fullness of what's going on here. But you're getting to this place where you're going to go, okay, look, we can understand that there is a time where he's coming soon. So God again is commissioning and admonishing them to be prepared all the time. Blessed is the person who obeys the words of this prophecy written in this book. Then I, Yochanan, the one hearing, was seeing these things. When I heard and saw them, I fell down to worship at the feet of an angel, showing them to me. But he said to me, don't do that. I'm only a fellow servant with you and your brothers, the prophets, and the people who obey the words in this book worship God. This is now, again, a second time he becomes so overwhelmed, or he's struggling to process what's going on here, that he literally starts to fall and worship this angel. And again, he gets corrected. This is important. Why? Right. Right. Angel worship, problematic, number one. And we also have further illusion of, again, Peter coming into Cornelius' house. And Cornelius falls down at his feet. And Peter says, that's right, you make his marry. Not so much. Okay, he says to him, yes, no, me, I'm also a fellow servant. Get up. Alright, so we have different religious groups that want to have a bit of a claim to fame, and therefore it's okay to bow to them and kiss jewelry. This is not biblical. Okay? Yeah. Verse 10. Then he said to me, don't seal up the words of this prophecy in this book, because the time of their fulfillment is near. Now, if you do a little parallel, when you see when Daniel gets a vision, he says, seal this up, for the time has not yet come. Now, Daniel gave us the massive timeline over the kingdoms of men, right? And then the kingdom of men will be destroyed, and God, or Yeshua, will come and he will establish his kingdom above all the kingdoms of men. Right? We see that play out in Revelations through the different battles, the Armageddon battles and all the rest of it, to get us to the point where he is reigning and ruling. That's the fact. Nothing's going to change that. It's going to be established. Yes?
Didn't something similar happen in Jeremiah as well when God sealed his mouth, so he wasn't allowed to speak before the destruction came? Before the Israelites were exiled.
Jeremiah, he told him, you can talk, but they're not going to listen. Same as Isaiah.
I think Jeremiah himself said, I will no longer speak.
Yeah.
He had silence. For a
He
period.
is-
He's already started speaking again. Yeah.
He's straight, yeah. Jeremiah is very much complicated. It wasn't that God didn't want to listen, but he knew that the listening, all the talking, and all those things wouldn't change the hearts of the people. It's the same as Isaiah. All right? You're going to go to a people and they're not going to listen. Jeremiah gets told not to cry out. And this is, remember, he was a Levite. Right? So he's sitting over there trying to do his job, helping people to deal with their sin, interceding and all the rest of it. And God tells him, shh, you're wasting your time. They're not going to change. His heart was breaking for his people. And at times he was frustrated, just like Elijah and those guys thinking, how can you not understand this? I mean, there's many a prophet that are pulling their hair out because the people are not listening. They're not turning. You know, one of my favorite illustrations is Nehemiah. You know, how bad must it get when he grabs you by the beard and he slaps you across the face and then he still has beard hair in his fingers? And he says, you people were destroyed, you were kicked out the land, and when I leave you, I come back, and what do I find? You're trading on sheep. Right? He was that angry that he had no problem laying hands on these guys. And he says, you know, I'm tearing my garments. I'm crying out. I feel horrible because there's no wall around the city. My home's in ruins. And you people don't even realize why you were kicked out in the first place. You think you're going to act like the world and stay in God's land and it's going to be okay? It's not going to happen. Right? Continually. I wouldn't say the greatest, but you see these guys who are put out there, and what I love about scripture is it's very honest. These guys struggled. They were frustrated. They were torn. They were angry. They were defeated. They were lost. I mean, I think of Elijah. You know, that weird part of scripture, that after he goes up to Carmel and he's there and then he's like, this is it, the culmination of all my ministry. Prepares an altar. He rebuilds an altar that was there. Mikvah, he pours water on it. 12 buckets full. And then he says, let God answer. And he answers by fire. Everything restored, cleansed, put in its place. I will answer your call. And in the next ensuing chapters, you've got Jezebel saying, I'm going to hunt you down, I'm going to kill you. And he just goes down to the river and he says, that's it, just kill me now. Give up. I think his struggle was that if these people don't listen and turn off that, then what good is a prophet in their midst? How many more signs? How much clearer do we have to get? How many miracles do you have to see before you understand that he's real? And if he's real, when are you going to change? Right? Daniel has already stated, this is it, guys. It is done. The book gets sealed up until the point where John turns around and he goes, now you understand Daniel. That stone that's going to take out the kingdoms of man, that establishment of God's throne and his kingdom, this is now being revealed to you. And in a sense, Revelation is an addition to Daniel's timeline. It helps us understand the 70th week. It helps us understand what he's establishing. And we understand it because everything's built up to this point. Okay? This is something that you need to believe and that you can hang on. God is saying, trust it. As sure as I'm sitting in this chair touching this table, I will come. And when it's all said and done, you will be standing before me. What will your answer be? We get so caught up in the stuff, and at this time of year, it's really important. The stuff we hold on to is the stuff you can't take with. I shared it with you when I came back from Israel. Sat there and I was like, Abba, what is it that gets us so stuck in the cycle? When we come back, I'm fueled, I'm filled, I'm compassionate, I have mercy, I'm here, I can feel you. And then I come back, and after 6 weeks of being here, it sort of just ebbs away at me, like something slowly drawing the spirit out of me. And I'm like, you know, after 10 times, you think I would have figured it out by now. 10 times, I still come back and I'm like, what is it, Abba? And he gave me just a simple word. And again, it was on the way home from work. And he just said, you can't take it with you. And I stopped and I started thinking about that. And the more I think about that, the more I start to get excited and concerned at the same time. Number one, our fixation on our stuff is that which defines us. If you take away our stuff, we have no role to play, therefore we are not important anymore. We get so focused on the things that we forget about the kingdom of God and the thing that you are supposed to be. The second part of that I've been thinking a lot about, and I think Revelation's going to have something to do with that, is what happens if he comes in our lifetime and he says, well, why are you freaking out about all this stuff when I'm coming now? You can't take it with you. Now, whether it's get up and go to Zambia and do the work until I come and fetch you, or whether it's I'm already knocking at the door, you don't see it yet because maybe you just don't understand it, but look, it doesn't matter, your bond payment doesn't matter, your business plan doesn't matter. I mean, yes, you've made contracts and fulfill those obligations. That's what Torah tells us to do. But I promise you, if you're still worried about your bond payment when I'm knocking at the door, or your school, or your house, or your toys, or your accolades, he says, I'm leaving all that behind. I'm coming here just for you. You don't get a chance to run in and pack a camping bag. all the stuff that we're holding on to stays here. It is fixed. It will happen. And the only question you have to answer is, will I be ready? I believe this time of support is a time of refreshing those moments. You know, when you say tongue in cheek, 10 minutes, no problem. But when you go to Israel, it's amazing how fast you climatize. I leave here with all the space I need, with everything that I have at fingertips, and we go there and you stay in a little hotel room. Most of them were literally 2 beds and a bathroom, and a TV against the wall. Sometimes. Sometimes nice, sometimes not so nice. And you go there, and you sit there for, that's just where you go to sleep, but you're there. And I don't once miss space. I don't once miss my closet. I don't once miss my work. I don't miss my house. I don't miss, the only thing I miss is my family. And I sit there and it happens a lot, and you can ask the guys that have been. I would be quite happy to trade all of that just to go and spend time like that there. Because you're simply sitting in the presence of God, and all of a sudden your focus is not on your stuff, it's not on your room. All you know is you're tired, you want to go to sleep. Shower, bath, whatever you need to do, crash, and that's it. Because tomorrow, we're about God's business again. What do we do here? You're about your business. And every other day, you're about God's business. There's a massive shift that happens when you're focused on Him. 8 hours, 12 hours every day for 12 days. And if that shift can happen so quickly in 12 days, just imagine what it's going to be like when He comes to fetch you and you stay a couple of years with Him in the clouds. You're so not going to care about what happens over here, which holiday plan you were going to, which sea you were going to go visit, and all the rest of it. It's not going to matter. Only thing that's going to matter is that you're there. Right? So this time of this prophecy, this fulfillment, is being established. And I'll take you back to Daniel's timeline. Whoever keeps acting wickedly, let him go on acting wickedly. Whoever is filthy, let him go on being made filthy. Also, whoever is righteous, let him be doing what is righteous, and whoever is holy, let him go on being made holy. Famous verse. Pay attention, says Yeshua. So he's talking about people. He says, guys, these guys are going to carry on acting the way they are now. Sometimes some people are going to read Revelations and they're going to go, not for me. Yeah, we'll see if it comes true. And they ignore it. Pay attention, says Yeshua. I am coming soon, and my rewards are with me to give to each person according to what he has done. He's testing your fruit. I am the Aleph and the Tav, the Alpha and Omega, the A to Z, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. How blessed are those who wash their robes. Okay, now this is a bit of a hot topic. How blessed are those who wash their robes, so that they will have the right to eat from the tree of life and go through the gates into the city. Okay, now I think it's the King James and maybe 1 or 2 other translations, right? That'll say, whoever keeps these commandments, or whoever does his commandments, will have the right to enter it. Now, I had to go into a little bit of a study because we have a very interesting split. Now, I can understand both of these, and the best summation of these things mean they're both the same. But you need to understand the context of what they're saying. Now, when you look at this in Greek, I'm not a Greek scholar, but I can follow pages. The letters cannot be scribal error. Okay? Some of them are completely different. They're different words. So how do one group, the bulk of the group, say wash their robes? And how does the other group say, no, it's keep his commandments? So 2 completely different statements. Okay? Now, it comes back down to the ancient manuscripts. Okay? Contextually, the 2 oldest ones that we have, including the Vulgate and 7 other, and 5 of the church fathers, including John, all point to wash their robes. It is a more accepted, firm verse. Okay? The ancient church fathers, and the way John always phrases it, throughout his writings, he doesn't say do the commandments, as the translation is put in place. He always tells you to keep the commandments. So the phrase is foreign to the way John speaks. Okay?
Can you just tell us what is that original rendering? Blessed are those who wash their robes.
Wash the robes is the original.
Yeah. Wash their robes, yeah. To wash their robes, yeah. Blessed are those who wash their robes. Okay? Now the second sort of inkling we have in that, this idea of washing the robes is already happening in Revelations 12 verse 17 and Revelations 14 verse 12. And no one has any other rendering or any other difference in that verse. They all agree that that's the same. But it's the same in the Greek here again. Okay, so I'm not trying to nullify, because, you know, I like the rabbinic way of thinking. On the one hand, it's going to say wash your robes. On the other hand, it says doing keep his commandments. And when you look at the two together, to be washed and cleansed and covered in the blood of Yeshua means to obey his commandments. Okay? They happen on both sides. But if we are going to split hairs, the majority has washed the robes as the, what's the right word? As the accepted answer. There are maybe 3 or at most 5 manuscripts that have it, and they're actually later manuscripts that actually talk about keep his commandments. So just be aware of this. Be careful not to build your theology on one or the other here. Okay? No, there is what seems to be a little bit of a push and pull here in between the two. Understand that they're actually talking about the same thing. But if you want to go into it and do the study, all right, the list of manuscripts going all the way back to, like I said, at least 5 of the early church fathers. I'm talking about, the guys just after the disciples, all sort of had that sort of rendering in Revelations.
Is this some kind of warning?
It's a distraction.
No, it's distraction.
That's gone.
No, you shut it and stop.
Thank you, prophetess.
You're irritating me.
And
Like,
sometimes some
back
house
tension,
belongs
back
to all
tension.
those noises. Call it noises. It's not different things. So if someone's house belongs, it's got those noises.
Okay, so again, how blessed are those who wash their robes, who are covered in Messiah, but at the same time, if you love him, you keep his commandments. So to separate these two is really just picking hairs. It's the same thing, it's just rendered in 2 different ways. Alright? So that they have the right to eat from the tree of life and go through the gates into the city. So let's break it down. Those who belong to him and follow his mitzvot will have the right to enter into the city. If you call yourself a disciple, surely then you must follow and act like your rabbi. We are called, whoever is in Christ needs to act like Christ, walk like him. We are called to mimic him. This is where we get the idea of the word mime. Paul was actually using a term talking about one of the most popular types of plays in the time, theater talk. If I mimic somebody, does that mean I do opposite to what he does? No. Okay, it's the same as like people say, yes, it's a shadow, but then the shadow and the actual thing are 2 completely different ideas. No. If there's a shadow of a person walking there and up came Max, I'd be very surprised. Right? It's the same thing. They need to correlate, okay? Yeah.
And what happens if you don't keep the commandments? Won't you be allowed in the city?
Well, this is a very difficult discussion. Purely because when you look at Matthew 5, right? Matthew 5 says, if you nullify, if you tell others not to keep the least of these commandments, you will be called the least in the kingdom.
But now if we're going to be trustworthy to judge, to be judged, then who are going to be judging? They're all not in the city.
Remember, there's the point of the millennial reign. Now, if we understand that the Father, the first resurrection of the dead in Christ are raised first, and he gives the parable of the talents and other parables are talking about, if I have given you, then much will be given to you later. I believe we're probably going to be judging the nations that don't know him. help them understand, teach them about Sukkot and all of those things. Trying to get them to keep Torah as He has commanded us in the Great Commission. Right? Teach them to obey everything I've given you. Matt. Teach them to obey everything that I've told you to. And He taught Torah. Right? He lived Torah. He died Torah. So, what is our commission? He never said teach them Brit Chadashah. Didn't exist. Okay? But His disciples understood His thoughts and His desire in checking the interpretation of Torah. Okay? A perfect example of this is when you look at Matthew 5, it says, it is said, or you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. But I say unto you, what's the rest of the verse? If you look at someone in lust, you've already done. Now, does that mean that He's nullified the mitzvah? No, because He's saying that committing adultery is wrong. What He's telling you is, you've said to yourself that it's an outward act. I'm telling you it's an inward one. What they didn't understand is they never understood fully the sin of Eve. Now, where did her sin start? She listened to it, she looked at the fruit, and she perceived. She thought about it. I think it will be good. And then the body responded. When God tells you to do something, where does it come from? It starts inside. And then you think about it, and then you do it. So depending on what's in your heart, you're either going to deny God, and I say this cautiously because there's a few times where He told me to do something where I didn't. I still have the bruises to prove it. Okay? It takes practice. Thank God He's gracious and patient. But we get to a point where we have to realize that everything He gives you to do is to glorify Him, and it's for your good. You might not realize it, but He loves you that much that He's going to give you something more, and that's going to be a bigger blessing to you. All right? You build your house on the rock, okay? So to come back to your question, it is a difficult thing. At the end of the day, the only thing I know for sure is God will be able to judge the heart. Now, if a person gets to that place, told you 9 o'clock, 22:08. Please wait, Sifundo and C are coming in if you're live. Sifundo C, Kumanu. We're sitting over there, we get to the point. Let me wait 1 minute.
Okay, in the meantime, where it says wash your robes, that's Bible was taken as meaning salvation.
Yes.
Wash like your sin.
That's
That
it.
should give you the right to have something to the kingdom.
Right. It is a belief thing, but remember, your belief will lead you to obedience.
Yeah.
This is where things get blurry in our time span. Hasatan has been very good at teaching, or let me say it this way, making what was common and applicable into an abstract thought. Let's talk about grace. What's grace to you? Well, it's just the love of God all over. Let's talk about His love and faith. It's nothing tangible, it's nothing you can touch, but ultimately when you go down to the paleo, it's actually talking about something that's fixed, something that's there, something that you can chase. It was an action thing, right? And we get to this point, Matt, we get to this point where we need to understand that through His faith and through His sacrifice, we don't want to live that life anymore, and we want to grow and obey. Disobedience brings death, obedience brought life. And again, Great Commission. If He's talking about, if you love me, obey my mitzvah, it brings a very new or interesting spin on when you tell other people not to. Remember the servant that God received the talent, and he just took it and he buried it. What was the story of what was his heart condition when he did that? When he came back, he gave him back the talent, and he said what? What did he tell his master? You were a hard master. Does that sound like a love relationship to you? So did he have any love for his master in the way he did things?
feared him more than anything, but it wasn't a reverential respect, it was just fear. So it didn't motivate him to do anything other than what he thought wouldn't get him into trouble.
Also think, he said, even if you did that, he knew he would have established it, he would have put it into the bank. He said, if you knew I was that bad, why didn't you still act on my behalf? Because I'm still going to hold an account. But because he wanted nothing to do with him or his money, you're giving me your gift of salvation, but actually, when you come again, you're going to ask me what I did with it. I'm just going to tell you, well, it's not really about you, is it? It's about my life and what I did with it. And then he's going to stop and ask you, is that really what it's about? Yeah?
Could it actually link with that discussion we had about the bride of Christ, like who is the bride of Christ? Is it
It's a
linked to that?
possibility, but now you're trying to define people in a way that only God can see into. Because we have many a godly person who unfortunately has been told that they don't have to keep mitzvot. And unfortunately, because they've never tested it, they can't believe a lot of this stuff. But they were fervent for God and had relationship with God, but never saw the fullness and the blessing of coming into those things of celebrating His feast and keeping Tzitzit and keeping Shabbat as a sign that you belong to Him. Where God draws the line there, I'm not sure. But I know when we talk about the bride, we're talking about being her spotless. And anything, if I've touched anything defiled or unclean, that's going to surely defile my garments. And I think that's what makes the distinction between the bride and the guest. Okay? But that's just my interpretation. That's my view. Alright? God will ultimately know and define. But when we look at the pictures of, again, when you're going back to Sinai, to be the bride, you had to obey. You took His name. You took the blessings. You took the covenant. As soon as they acted out of covenant, there was destruction. And they were cast outside the camp. 3,000 people died because they wanted to mix and match and do it their way. You know, that concerns me today with Christianity. I said it, I had a discussion with a guy who has been a church elder for many years, and I said, I don't envy your position. And he says, well, you know, we don't see Christmas as this, even though we know there are some paganism things to it. So I said to him, I said, yes, but worshipping God in a pagan way, isn't it like the golden calf? They were still telling, this God brought you out of Egypt, and they were still pointing up the mountain, but they were using a pagan image to get their point across. I said, how well did it work out for them? And then he stopped and he said, I never thought about it that way. Right? It is that point or that process that we're really getting to, that we're saying, listen, I need to get rid of anything that is now going to give the misconception that any other God had any part to play in this. And another illustration I can use is Achan and I. Right? He took the cloak and he took the silver and he took all these things out of Jericho, and we can stop and ask and say, where did he get that stuff? In those times, the richest places were the temple. Right? That's where the bank was. That's where all the money was. That's where the greatest fabrics were. Look at Yeshua's tabernacle. Not Yeshua's tabernacle. Abba's tabernacle. Right? It had the best of everything. The big gems and all the rest of it. And the temple had all the wealth. Right? People had wealth, but they brought the best they had to God. So when you go in, where's the fastest place I'm going to score a buck? Do I know who's the mayor and who's not? No. Am I going to run into the palace? No. Temple's over there. It's in the central place of everything. It's easily accessible. So he probably pulled something out of there, and he probably used that when he hid it into the tent. Now, have you succeeded because God has gone out before you, or have you succeeded because Achan's got some stash of another God that gave you victory? Let's not make the mistake of thinking we can put our foot in 2 or 3 different camps. Like I said to you, we went to go look at that one guy's house, and then he had a statue of Mary in his garden. He was burning incense to some Hindu god, and on his car he had the license plate Shalom. He was trying to cover all of his bases. God alone will have his glory. Right? And the more we sat there talking to the people, the more he tried to peddle the fact that if you buy this house, you will be blessed financially. I don't want these blessings that you're trying to peddle, simply because you're serving not only one God, many gods, but you're serving them the wrong one, and your motivation is money. It's mammon. Okay? So we need to be able to think of just to distinguish between the two. But yes.
Sorry. I also think a very good example is also Rehoboam and Jeroboam. You know, their heart was, well, at the point when he took over and took the crowd up to Dan, his heart was to have the people a place of worship for God. But we all know how that ended. So again, God is very specific. He wants it his way and he doesn't want anybody to deviate from his way and his instructions. Even though we're trying to say, but it's for his glory and it's for him, he doesn't see it that way.
Yes. No, absolutely. We have to make sure that God is very particular about what he said, how we're supposed to act, what we're supposed to eat, what we're not supposed to eat, when we're supposed to celebrate, when we're not supposed to celebrate, how we're supposed to do that. I find it interesting that we will have discussions about all the other stuff and we ignore the stuff he gave us. No? There are many people wanting to go out and have ink done and have a tattoo with a big cross and say God saves and Yeshua HaMashiach and all those things. But they'll argue with you when you say, why don't you wear tzitzit? One is God instruction. The other, your expression of what you think he would like. Well, actually you want it and you want to put his stamp or his seal of approval. What is it that defines who you are? To God, is it ink? Or Shabbat, phylacteries, feasts, tzitziot, eating kosher? These are things that you set yourself apart with. But we think if we have a big sign on our back or on our arm or on our chest, that will be the very thing that will define my heart's condition because I put it on my body and no one can take that away from me. And why are you hesitant on wearing tzitzit and keeping Shabbat? I think you're trying to make a very bold statement, but in a very wrong way. Okay? So, let's get back into this. Okay. So, how blessed are those who wash their robes, so that they will have the right to eat from the tree of life and go through the gates into the city. And that's important because remember, they were kicked out of the garden before they were allowed to eat of the tree of life. God said, you don't eat of this tree, but of that tree it's fine. We don't ever ask the question why Adam and Eve never ate from the tree of life. How long were they in their garden? He said, get them out. They were cast out before they eat of the tree of life, and then they stay like this for eternity. They never ate from it in the beginning. They had the opportunity, but somehow around this one, when we understand our sin cycle, yes? You want me to draw it again? Oh, I can't draw it again. We don't have cameras. We brought everything to cameras. Give me a pen. No. I don't know. Okay, so we're going to have sin. Then it's going to come around. Sin should bring you to consequence. Consequences should bring me to Teshuvah. Teshuvah should bring me to unsinless. Aaron, want more of that mineral? If you repent, what should that bring you to? Obedience. Obedience, love, understanding. That's going to make us comfortable. And normally what happens is our comfort leads us to sin again. Because God took away the consequence. We don't want the consequence, we want the sin. How many of you have struggled with the idea? Let's use a silly example. You want to drink, but you don't want to get caught. You want to drink and drive, but you don't want to get caught. You want to run around with other women or other guys, but as long as we don't get caught, it's okay. I want to sleep around, but I don't want to get pregnant. I don't want to get any sort of fungus or STD or get this HIV thing. Apparently it's not very fun. So what do? We try to get rid of the consequence. I'm having fun. So if I condomize, then I don't have to worry about all that other stuff, man. Please. Be free. It's good for you. It's healthy. And society will give you a whole bunch of reasons why it's okay. For us, you are considered the weirdos if you wait for marriage to give yourself to anybody. They think that's foreign, they think that's old, they think you're wasting your time, you're denying yourself, and what was one bad excuse I heard, well, you're not gonna buy a car unless you test drive it. So you might as well just check it out before you pay the full price. That's just another one of us Satan's justifications. We don't want this, but if we don't have consequence, we don't get repentance. If you don't change, you only get dead faster. Okay? So we get to this point of, soon as I'm comfortable again, soon as I can just, soon as I can just touch base, then I don't have to worry about these things anymore, then I can just move on. Okay? So we need to be careful. This is the problem. I can walk in obedience and be comfortable with God, and I can be happy. I don't have to fall and bump my head and then take a bit of humble pie to realize that I was wrong to get me to the place where I can walk with Him. Okay? So we get to this interesting little cycle. Alright? So, yeah. So they will have a right to eat from the tree of life and go through the gates. Outside of the gates are homosexuals, those involved in the occult, with drugs, with sexually immoral, murderers, idol worshippers, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood. Now just stop there for a second. How do I know that this is in the wrong place in the book?
Because they've already been cast into the lake of fire.
Right, the second death is done, he's established everything, there will be no more sin, everybody is sorted again, and now he's talking about sinners banging around again. Okay? Can't possibly be for here. He's again admonishing and talking to John, telling them to pay attention, be blessed that you will walk through, covered with the blood of Yeshua, getting in here, and you will have the privilege of, but the rest of the world won't. You cannot be a believer and practice drug use, being sexually immoral, putting one foot in the occult, murdering people and saying, don't worry, only God can judge me. If you don't make teshuvah, there's no repentance. True teshuvah, not fake, I'm sorry, and carry on doing what you do. There is a point when he says, I will have nothing unclean or an abomination enter my camp. Don't think you can mix light and darkness. I love you, and listen to me. We look at this and the world will tell you you're taking away this person's free will, and we have a whole bunch of arguments. Let's use homosexuality for an example. I was born this way, so therefore don't judge me. Okay? First argument. If God made you homosexual, and he judged you because you were homosexual, that would make him an unrighteous judge, yes? And you would not have free will. So me thinks there's something wrong with your theology. Okay? You have chosen this. Don't blame God for your choice because of your judgment.
Or people that is born with both genitals. That person is not going to know who they are. Where do they fit in?
That's a good question. If you're sitting here, you're talking about both fully developed or some
No,
someone.
fully. No, fully. And I know of someone. So,
And that is not your usual term. I don't know.
what about that person?
It's a broken word.
Yeah, that's completely out of there. I mean, obviously, that is a difficult question to answer because obviously they would have to make a choice of whether they want to be one or the other, and normally the parents would have made a decision to.
They usually wait
But-
until you're like 13, 14 to see which hormones kick in, but by that time the damage is done. So wouldn't that be an exception? If that person didn't really know?
I think it's a difficult one. And again, you know, God's talking about, here he's talking about people that are obviously practicing in it. I think there you would have to definitely have, as far as where God would understand.
Doesn't that usually happen when there's like an abomination on the descendants? I'm almost 100% sure of it.
You know, in
Still,
cases
that's
like
still
we
a
have
person,
people
yeah.
marrying, like what, brother and sister marriage or something along
Well,
those lines.
obviously there's a deformality of if that happens.
Right.
And something like that as well, it's not natural.
That's not
Exactly.
natural,
So
but what
basically-
about that person, even if their parents did whatever, what about that person?
Well, it sounds a bit cursed for the things our forefathers did.
Now, but there's still, it's a valid question. I mean, there is a point where you, if you are both,
No, I guess then we can only understand it if you have read the Bible. For example, it's not what you do or you aren't really, I said, born like that. It's more like something your forefathers did.
Yeah.
So you have to pay the price for it.
I think here I used to, yeah.
I'll just say something. I know there was, I think it was my grandfather or one of my, they dealt with something very similar. They were involved, they were male and female, and they went into, if I remember correctly, how they explained to me is that they were praying that the father could reveal it, and they, you know, earnestly, out of a earnest heart, praying about this and whatnot, they went into the waters of baptism and came out, and they completely, I can't remember which one, completely out of that. So I do think, you know, when the father, when the person, I've heard many stories like that, but one guy also had, he had tattoos all over his body and came to know Christ. And one tattoo that really grieved him was a tattoo of Satan on his chest. And we tried to get this removed, it was too expensive and whatnot. And the father just said to me, go, big fuck, go get baptized. Went into the waters of baptism, out, removed completely. So the thing is this, God, He does reveal, and He will restore. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He will restore.
Well, yeah, I think that would probably be the best when he's being the creator. Obviously, he would have known what he would have made him to be, and then would have left. Worst case scenario, absolutely says a choice.
I just wanted to share a testimony that my mom was telling me about someone she knew. He was gay before, and there was also another lady who was lesbian before, and I think it's important to realize what's actually going on in the spiritual realm. And he says that when he gave his life to God, and he had a vision of God, he said God brought him back to his mother's womb. And because of the sins of the parents that welcomed in spirits into the house, we all know that there's a spiritual battle going on. So now what happened was, as he left his mother's womb, a spirit came upon him. And that spirit actually gave him the temptations of being gay and everything. It actually made him like that. So it like gave claim to him. And when he gave his life to God, he realized what was going on, and he was cleansed from that spirit, and he was no longer gay. And
I think
something
that's
similar happened to a lesbian as well.
important what you're saying is tempting.
Yeah.
It's tempting.
I just say that I know who you're speaking of, and that man again had a choice to reverse that. He got married and now he's got kids.
Yeah.
Big change. Good question. All right.
When you mentioned earlier how they born this way, I think they only get that through trauma, through whatever. And they assume that they were born that way, but meanwhile it was a trauma and what they were brought up with.
We justify our choices all the time, isn't it? Saying, well, you know, that's just the way I am, deal with it. You know, I was counseling a couple and they were doing something wrong, and then they said to them, it is what it is. That was their answer when I asked them what they're doing. It is what it is, we're not going to change it. And I went, yeah, I know what this is. Right? But again, we justify why, whatever situation we're in. And again, we need to understand that there is temptation, and you can give into that temptation in any which way, shape, or form. But ultimately, we need to check our base and realize whether it is of the Father or not, and we know that the Father doesn't tempt us with it. Right? So we need to make sure where our grounds are and what we need to go. Okay. I, Yeshua, have sent my angel to give you this testimony for the Messianic communities of the church. I am the root of the offspring of David, the bright morning star. The Spirit and the bride say, Come. Let anyone who hears say, Come. And let anyone who is thirsty come. Let anyone who wishes take the water of life free of charge. I warn everyone hearing the words of this prophecy in this book that if anyone adds to them, God will add him to the plagues written in this book. If anyone takes anything away from the words in this book of this prophecy. Let's just stop there for a second. Where else have we heard this before? Yeah, Deuteronomy talks about it. You will not add to or subtract from this thing. But listen to it carefully. God will add to him the plagues written in this book. What plagues? In Egypt, in this book?
And there's also a place we refer to in Revelations that is a spin-off from Egypt.
Well, it's one of the same pictures, and I believe that gives you the same indication. So if you ignore or add to or take away from this thing, you will deal with the plagues written in this book. Is that a possibility? And I'm just throwing it out there, that could possibly mean that you would have to go through tribulation? Because are those the only plagues written in this book? They're not. There are more plagues in Revelation than the tribulation period. They're not telling you.
I don't know, I see it as when he says in this book, he's not just referring to Revelation.
He's talking about this.
Revelation about
The whole.
Not directly, but a bit of that.
I thought it spoke about the whole Bible, but it wouldn't be because he wasn't,
It's the same picture. He's talking about, and again, now this is just another inkling, that if there are people, and I know we discussed about the Exodus and the plagues and how they paralleled and all the rest of it, and how Joshua and all of those things also paralleled in what God is establishing. But there is a point where these people did not know who God was, who he is, what he was. They didn't even know his name. They cried out because they were suffering, and they didn't even know who to cry out to. So when God was teaching them in Egypt, he was teaching them, I am God, the first 3 plagues. I can distinguish between my people and God, and I have no equal. If you are already the bride of Christ, would you need to go through those lessons? I'm not going to give you an answer to that. Think about it. Yeah.
Vince?
Yeah.
Also, I would just add that is it because this is the revelation of Yeshua, and it says don't take away and don't add to it. Is it not the people that want to add to who Yeshua is or take away from who Yeshua is that then end up with those plagues, because they basically are giving a warped picture of the revelation that is trying to be given of him, everything that he is, everything that he's trying to do at the end time, and they're trying to twist it, and that's why the plagues come on.
It's quite possibility. It's also the case of the same as he is Torah. Right? So whoever adds to Torah is again giving a false representation of God. It's the same thing.
Yeah, so what Manny just said now is what was actually going to say is that he's referring to as this as basically a warning, because so a warning is given I think it's in either James or Peter when he's referring to those who want to be teachers. He's saying that you are held accountable for the people that you will teach and you will receive double judgment. Right? He says be very careful to becoming teachers because you will be held accountable. Because in Torah it refers to what will happen to a false prophet and a person who does false teaching. So he's now giving basically a forewarning once again, is to say, if you add to my word, I will add to you the place of this book. And if you take away from my word, I will take away your name from the book of life. So he's giving you basically a stern witness to say, my words are mine, not yours. Don't add to something that you don't know. Because a lot of times, I mean, if you look throughout, I mean, I did a little bit of study on this, and I looked at this, and I said to myself, I said, you know, so many people are quick to give their own interpretation of things. and they have no backing on it. They don't seek the Father about it. It's just their own interpretation of what they think this is. And for me, it's a very dangerous thing to go across, is because where are you getting this from? Is this coming directly from Father? And have you got scripture to back it? Because if you don't, you're putting yourself in a very dangerous place. And don't take away from something that the Father has said that is His.
Yeah, so again, he's pointing to what looks like. And I say that tentatively, what looks like, that if you do, and if you ignore the stuff, you might have to go through tribulation. Okay? Those were the curses and those were the difficult times that were written down in Revelations. Okay? Right.
No, and if you look in the internet, there's so much weird stuff out there. Although they claim to be working from Revelations, but some of the ideas and things they come up with, there's nowhere in this book.
The internet can be very dangerous.
And I'm going, just as you were reading, I was thinking about these guys. I mean, they've been adding and adding and adding until they've actually believe it. And if no one bothers going back to reading the book, they'd also believe it.
Yeah, we have to check these things. Right. The one who is testifying to these things, yes, I am coming soon. Amen. Come, Lord Yeshua. May the grace of the Lord Yeshua be with you all. Right. So, even at the end of it, he's saying all the rest of this, and this is what's going on. All excitement, all happy. But understand, you knowing the end should give you hope and excitement that he's going to come and sort out it. All right. Very quickly, I want to discuss Revelations 20. Magog, Gog and Magog. All right. So this one, according to this little outline, we have. When does Revelations 20 Gog and Magog happen?
After the millennium.
No,
Yeah,
Or
after.
in between the millennium and
actually, if you follow Ezekiel or
No,
something.
no. Well, you'll see something very different, and this is why I'm doing this. If you look at Ezekiel, you're going to see something. It's 38 and 39. Okay. I want us, let's play again. Okay. Yes. While I have my minions, shall we take from Anya across that table? You guys come here. All right. I want a breakdown. Hey, welcome to Sunday nights. Okay. You guys want the fun one or
The fun one.
all right.
No, I
You know when I say fun, all right. Ezekiel 38 and 39. That's the fun one. I want you to list the events and where the people come from, more or less, what sort of alliance they come from, and then you've got Auntie Mandy there to help you. She's done lots of studies when it comes to this stuff. This table, you're going to look at Revelations 20, and you're going to tell me about where the enemy comes from and where in the timeline this thing sort of takes place. All right? For you on live feed, don't fall asleep. Right. Okay. So look at Ezekiel 38 and 39. I want to know the enemy, where they come from, what is the order of their gathering, and for what purpose. Revelations 20, same thing. All right. Can we take 10 minutes? You've got 15 minutes. We can play this a little bit. All right. You got the easy one. If you want to, you guys can go into Ezekiel and then start doing the parallel. Revelations 20.
Just to stop on that one, the key. Oh, no, we discussed it last
We discussed all that other stuff. Just want you to be focusing on it. Says they Gog and Magog, but the description seems different from the one in Ezekiel, right? The one in Ezekiel talks about the people coming from the far north, right? Now, we get a bit of an interesting play there where he's talking about literal north, or he's talking about true north, which is a slightly different direction. Yeah, are we literally trying to be breaking it out of Russia, or one of the two, okay? Well, you never know, these Turks may be funded by Russia, they can kind of get into it. But when you look at Revelations 20, it doesn't talk about the northernmost regions coming over against them. It talks about the people from all four corners. So now we're talking about a worldwide coalition versus a northern coalition. That's the type of stuff you're going to try and just unpack a little bit. So just try and break up.
My brain would say, how can that be possible? They've lived with this shirt for thousands of years. Why such a
Zechariah 14. Those who refuse to come up to celebrate my feast, the same also called Paul is ignorant. Why is the people that refuse his teaching? And with Hasatan coming out,
haven't met him.
and with Hasatan coming out,
Yeah. He stirs the whole pot.
that's why Revelation's 20 timeline is important. Right? So if he comes up and he starts to gather the nations, it was your hardness of heart. You don't want him as your king anyway. Let's go again. And therefore, you know what? This is the last time he's going to hold away our reign and tell us what to do. Slightly different from Ezekiel.
Go out and see the nations, all the city, both in and both, together in battle. The number is countless, as the sand on the seashore, and they came up from the great. All the nations were numbered, came to be God's people will sing each other. But fire came up from the
The guys who say Turkey have got no backdrop with that sort of is
a great one, right?
just interesting what it is. Say
It's no place Russia for. It's fully dead, no great.
They should be reading
In other words, they should be dead to judge from what is written in the books according to what they've done. To see their of the dead in it. Death and Sheol gave up the dead in them, they were judged each according to what he had done. And death and Sheol were hauled into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. Anyone whose name is not found written in the book of life is thrown in the lake of fire.
So that will common culture is Peter I've been there.
You've been to the future.
This is after the millennial reign.
This is after the 1,000 years.
Where is he reigning?
So
Jerusalem. So it's not maybe. It's maybe does it differently.
Yes, you are 100% right. So it's set now.
it's prior, yeah. Later was different.
Yes, you are. Yes, you're right.
So then the 70s you that indication. Will come with that stop line. He's going to rule, establish his kingdom millennially.
Ezekiel
And then at the end of 1,000 years, Revelations 20, puts one, let's go take him. Let's go sort you.
What the answer is.
Right. So, if you guys are happy, start scribbling down your notes under Revelations 20. Make a note, scribble on your computer.
Don't have much.
No, there isn't much. What you guys can do is after this you go play, because you already done it. Genesis 10.
This is 10, yeah. So this is fine.
Okay, but scribble your Revelations notes before and then we'll do Genesis 10. I've written a column there in the middle.
So what did we say, guys? When is it? Logan McDowell, he was after 1,000 years. Four quarters or corners.
The way mine puts it is we go out to see the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, God and Magog. It's though the whole four corners of the earth exist. Doing whatever God and Magog Sorry,
Nah, okay.
the four corners of the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. It sounds as though he's calling all the nations
The funny thing is,
that are rebelling against Christ.
well, It's normally referred to as a person coming in God because of place. And when you look at Genesis 10, God is a person. Yeah, which is one of the sons of Noah. The guy called Ham was going to So we go to Genesis 10. See, it says there. Here's the genealogy of the sons of Noah. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Some were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer and Gog. Madai, Yavan, Sifra, and Shem. God is not God. But God comes up to Ezekiel 38, which is what they do. That's the first time they were mentioned together. That's what I'm saying. So all of these guys are Canaan, the son of Ham, Mitzrayim, son of Ham, and then you had later Nimrod, which is none of them. No, God, yeah. God and God. God is the name of God. Yeah, it's the individual. God can be individual, and God individual and place.
Because it talks about if we go, how do you think of the just to give you a little bit more indication.
The human being can refer to Gog, Gog, and then Gog, and Gog. Chief prince of Meshech, which was the other one, the son, and Tubal, the other son, prophesy against him. I'm against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech. Chief Yes, Bush
Can be determined as a place, or can be in the head of
Those countries
of Meshech.
are picked as the ones that are going to be one for
So
Israel.
he established his authority. It's called
They say that they could reverse Syrian, right? Which is Syria. So you can write down these countries. Turkey,
See, Gomer is also mentioned in verse 6, which was the first
Yes,
son.
it was son.
Gomer, before his troops, the house of the far reaches of the north. Many people are with you. Tell yourself you're really, you and all your crowd are going to
and the little one is Lebanon.
You will come up like a storm, you will be like a cloud covering the land, you will your troops.
So now we have to say, is it true north? Because true north to Israel is true north, more than Israel.
And you will, this is in verse 16, and you will invade my people Israel like a cloud covering the land as in the upper middle of the 3 days, and I will bring you
We're going to
against my enemies with the Israel version.
and that whole area used to be known as Medio-Persia. So you know that Medio-Persia used to be a big pain for Israel in ancient times. And they say that that's the area where the constant Egypt. But he's going to come, and we even have a Persia in verse 5. So there we go, Medio-Persia. So that can include Turkey, it can include Syria, it can include Iran, it can include Iraq. And for some reason, Ethiopia and Libya, which are actually North Africa, but is also surrounding Israel to the southwest, seem to get in on this action. Yeah, surrounding Israel in one way or another seems to be coming against Israel. So basically,
But he was originally a man.
I don't think this is the Antichrist yet. I think that is the revelation to the world. This is
So it's supposed to be behaving like the first person to show revelation. There's no specific
The one we pick up in
Also,
Ezekiel,
that's also been Trump is just in simple
it's an executive teaching that the one in Ezekiel will happen now.
Chef and Yifar.
The tribulation.
They also mentioned his sons.
Or it will happen and then result in the tribulation.
Yeah, so, and they're the younger brothers. So,
There's
so
an
you expect
Antichrist, Israelis
Right,
people
it's
are
many.
going to split.
It comes deal.
All these people that were just in him, which are
And now the Japheth is what exactly?
He is supposed to be
No, he wasn't. Canaanites came from Noah's son Ham.
one last sort of crazy back. He told him to believe that when he comes out of that
straight
You know,
from,
that's
yeah,
not the
yeah.
That's not the regulation.
Yeah, and then I was 500 years old before the change had an effect. For the,
The war will be done to ensure constitution of the nation. So that's
and for the vision,
Oh,
no, not Petra, Mitzrayim, Put and Canaan came. Just the hand was there. The Midi, for the Canaanites, Nineveh, and then you have the Philistines, which also came across.
where the crisis was.
Mitzrayim ordered
Time lapse,
the custom
knowing that
king,
those were always
from whom came the Philistine.
and knowing that when it says war,
So, Yafet,
more or less the
Yafet, Zola, Magog, and Russia, and Russia,
the United States and Britain.
the sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz is from Europe, right?
It's now labeled that way. That's why it is always be about the release of the father. It will always be about the release because that release are a fighting
Well, often they were told they were being invaded by Babylon and Assyria, which was actually part of the
No, you're right, Sam. Turkey is straight north. Lebanon, there's Beirut. Beirut,
If I'm not mistaken, there was a promise for Lebanon, there was a promise for,
the Mediterranean coast.
well, surrounding countries, Lebanon,
Jordan
Jordan doesn't have a promise, Jordan is
They are making a
Muslim
sort of
agreement, there's no
alliance
promise
with
for
the
Jordan.
main character is either Turkey
Sudan is straight north. We have
or Russia,
Turkey.
whatever it is, it's not just one country.
That's straight Turkey, and then from that we have Ukraine, Russia, Moscow.
Yeah, Ghana.
Busy trying to win the Syrian war, but has actually been putting fighters on the ground in Syria, right on Israel's border, Syria and Lebanon.
You know, I've read,
So this is a very interesting thing, and they've started to bring their warships
I was able to
around the coast, and they started talking their warships
taking into
right on the coast. So this
the line
is
of
setting the
operation
scene
also
for something
answers
which
Lebanon's meeting with Russia. Russia is the main threat. Don't rule out Turkey.
So we must obviously unfolding before our eyes if this continues to develop.
Geographical.
We must Ezekiel 38, 39 thing happen. But remember, this is not important. It is Israel. It is against Israel. But
Yes.
and he will fight the war for us. So the Libya and the Ethiopia. But we have to believe that they have
very
the
fact that
promises
the
of
two
France. At this point, I don't know what is doing
I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's Iraq.
Ethiopia and Libya. I can guess that it is also a possibility.
It's Iraq or Iraq, it's one of those.
Israel discovered a massive shale gas
Turkey originally had it, now
the
it's
Mediterranean coast, more or less in sight.
Yeah.
And they are now becoming the main supplier of energy and gas to the world. And they're actually taking that away from Russia and those other Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia. So the split that they currently say is people that are looking for is their best qualities. Because their best quality is so much bigger than what you originally anticipated. And so they have a massive, massive thing to capture enough of Israel to allow them to take the part over and get to the gaps. So that's maybe what they just right now. Because if you look at the Bible in verse 12,
Yes.
speaking of, livestock,
I've actually been in Auckland with those.
and it says silver and gold.
Oh, it's a beautiful place.
What is the life
Turkey, which is going to the blue water instead of white
This,
water.
we he had understood a massive shale gas deposit.
Europe,
Would have
across
understood
the Black Sea in Asia.
the wealth of the land to be
And
gold,
for almost
silver,
the
and livestock.
Asian side is
The
the
gold,
golden side
silver,
for Turkey culture as to the European
So
side.
let's get
That's more
um,
it's very good.
so those people be a
Yes.
foreshadow of inflation.
No, it's this one. That's
And it's a shadow of inflation because it's got this block of wood all the time.
yeah.
But
Well, it is very
it is a foreshadow of the Antichrist.
You say that there's, but when she was ready for us, but
Just to see to what I mean the Turkish now from being in Turkey I can see it as
they either go, well, they
He's
don't
got this
go
unique,
to a
they've got this unique
where they'll
it's
obviously
just stuck on the side of the it's special.
They're not so
I mean,
sure about
they
that.
already are
So the key takes in that,
so
either
compared to the rest of
we
the
look in,
so
when the
it's
conflict
it's
standing,
struggle to see
when the conflict standing died, and then Solomon went to him and summoned him from the dead, and said, why do you serve my grace? So there's a few takes on it that either you'll be rested in the ground, speaking in the ground, and then your spirit will rise up, or during judgment day, or you'll be in heaven waiting.
No.
There's no one knows.
yes.
Yeah, it is King Saul, sorry.
I was just wondering. I know that, because I mean, if you think about it, when she was Satan be locked up in it. That's where you'll be 4,000 will be and I don't think
Yes,
he's
no,
not in
that's
the hole.
often
Doesn't he just bound? He just bound. He wants to leave.
show this knowledge of
No, I mean,
God.
so then,
Talking about words is there has to be a certain
They can 38 now.
and he just checks that meets where God already.
Yes.
Well, he's been out of the pit, so because he's been out of the pit, you can imagine if you are him and you've got your last battle and you're trying to
Oh, no.
you then come with possibly gathers whoever is can't even see the believe there's still people being silly. And they come against
Yes, yes.
this is not about us being good, they're coming against they come against the camp of the saints. Right? Because they live in Jerusalem, they come against that. And then Yeshua has to deal with it.
The reason I was just like thinking, because when Abraham, when God was Abraham, those are the words.
Right. Hello ladies and gentlemen.
That was a.
Do you have some sort of picture you can draw for us on this map? There we go. Yeah, I'm waiting, yeah?
Busy,
I'm sure.
You can have, eh? What you can have, or whatever you have, coffee, just water. But full or less? That's fine. Sugar? Sugar.
Who had the promise policy with these guys?
Like you said, that's from this.
Don't come with it.
Yeah. So why always has to be. Hey? So yeah, just sorry, that's a box. This one. Yeah, it's one. Okay,
Dylan,
Yes.
you must get this book. You must have some of this.
I don't drink coffee.
No, just
No.
It's okay.
Oh, is it Turkish?
When you take it, you the skin spots.
You take milk, eh?
Yes, they.
Is it Turkish? Is that not, is that Hebrew or is that? Oh, the after must have worked together. Just send me a picture. Oh, is she?
Just tell me what it does.
I don't drink.
Does it
Oh, you haven't had it?
I don't drink.
Just have one. Just one. Can't drink coffee.
Yeah.
Mineral.
No, I feel old.
I don't know.
My body does. My mind is young. My body feels like 40 years
It's
old.
just because you've been working in the family affects you or whatever. Give it a couple of weeks, you'll be fine. These poor people on live stream.
Yeah, no.
There's the turkey.
No, it's finished. It's finished. A new stage, yeah, there's such a little bit left.
Oh, you won't
But there's more. No, 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 no. I need to speak to
Alfie's
them.
winning.
I know, she's been 12 packets. 12 packets. Not double packets. You mean business?
One packet a month. So when we were going more, ration it out.
Rations, that's what you need. You'll have 6 and I'll have 6. It'll be good, I think, for at least 2 weeks. As long as we don't go sperm. Or that Indian place. Who's that? That's expensive. Yes, that's about all we sort of
Alright, okay. So, in Revelations 20, my Revelations 20 ends.
Yes, we only come up with 3 things.
Yes, it was nice and deep. It was the shortest part of scripture you've seen.
That
Alright.
is the summary of what we had, just so
Okay,
you know.
so Gog and Magog, this battle scene will take place after the 1,000-year reign. The enemy comes from the 4 corners of the earth, right? They come from everywhere, okay? And they're going to come up against Yeshua, who's in Jerusalem, okay? So we cannot get confused with this idea of the Megiddo battle that happens in Har Megiddo, right? That is something different, okay? So that happens before the 1,000 years, this happens after the 1,000 years. When you look at Ezekiel 38, 39, you look at them when it's a specific northern group of people. Now there's 2 schools of thought. Is that when you look at this, manhandle. Max, move. Yeah. They're coming from one specific region and they make a coalition. Okay? With that coalition, okay, a certain group of people. Now you can either look at true north or you can look at literal north. Okay? If we're looking at, and the word in Hebrew takes it to that says the northernmost point. If you take it from Israel and you follow out the globe, it's going to take you virtually knocking onto a group of people from Moscow. It's virtually in alignment. Okay? The people that really don't want it to be Moscow will say that's slightly northeast. Okay, and you do yourself a favor, have a square, draw the line, and you will see it's like not even a figure's breadth apart. It is hitting the point or the head of, okay, the capital of Russia. Okay, if we're looking at true north, it's going to take you to Turkey, and people will look at it and then they will go, you see, I've listened to some little interesting comments, like you see that the churches in Revelations only are in Turkey, so therefore Gog and Magog will happen in Turkey. For me, it's a little bit of a weak link. All right, there's nothing really breaking down there. Okay, so we've got 2 possibilities. When you look at this northernmost point, this word, the prince of, or the chief prince depending on your translation, can mean Rosh, okay, which is the head, or the land, the prince of Rosh. Okay? So he's the head of the region of, some people pronounce it Rus. Okay? And then we have these little inklings. What I did find interesting is that Josephus and Herodotus, Josephus the Jewish historian, Herodotus the Greek historian, pointed back to Scythian groups and the Mosque groups that are supposed to be near the Black Sea region. Now, they're understanding that these guys were the first horsemen of the time, and when you look at the battle that takes place, it talks about horses and horsemen. I think it would have made a lot of sense to them identifying these people with that sort of idea. Again, it's a very functional thing. Okay? Obviously, we can talk about maybe it's an Arab coalition. There is definitely a coalition, but at the same time, what I wanted you guys to notice is these two descriptions seem to happen at two different times. Okay? The guys who studied Ezekiel, do we have any mention, besides maybe Gog being the prince of a place called Gush, as any mention of Hasatan, Yeshua in Jerusalem, any sort of millennial kingdom being established, sin being dealt with, the great Armageddon war taking place? It doesn't give you any indication of that. But the chapters before them talk about a regathering of the land, talks about them coming back, it talks about them getting the renewed covenant, 36, 37, reborn, 38. Once we're in the land, then there's going to be problems. Right, this battle doesn't seem to have taken place yet. And I've said it before, I'm nervous of framing modern or our times and saying, looking at prophecy and going, no, this is it. The fact that Russia is so heavily involved on Israel's border gives us an interesting illusion to this Prince of Rosh, these people that are coming from the northernmost point, coming down. They have set up bases in Syria. They are basically controlling the country. The only patrols they have along the northernmost borders of Israel are Russian patrols. And what would be the purpose of them coming down? What was your conclusion?
For the spoil of Israel. They want the spoil.
Okay, so it's a time of spoiling. What would be the purpose of this one in Revelation 20?
Clearly coming against Yeshua once Satan is led out of the pits, he's just coming with his might now to give it his last chance, I guess, last go.
Yeah, and he gathers as many nations who are around, who still don't want to listen, who still don't want his kingship, and then they take up against him. So this one is about plunder, this one's about God. Okay? If you take it back, and there's an interesting study, you take these guys, Gog and Magog, and Meshech and Gomer and those guys, if you go back and look at Genesis 10, it'll give you a table of these guys actually by name. Okay? And you can go into a study and you can break down to think, okay, more or less where these guys come from. And like I said, Josephus, and then we'll add to that. All right? For me, be aware there's a possibility of both.
I read something that says those two Gog and Magog wars bookmark Yeshua's reign. The Ezekiel 38 and 39 one is supposed to usher in tribulation.
Okay?
Which is going to lead to his coming. And then he will have his millennial reign, and that then bookmarks that before the new heaven and the new earth are created. So there's two wars for establishing Yeshua almost.
So happens here to here at the end of millennial, the end of 1,000 years. And this one
just prior to tribulation.
Prior or pre?
Oh, sorry, pre-tribulation.
Pre-trib. Just before the tribulation and everything starts to go in. And this will probably be a bookmark of what we could probably say the 17 weeks of then. Maybe.
Maybe.
over that period. It's a possibility of a 7-year cycle. And again, this is part of the challenge is we've got that 3.5-year interlude where you've got the witnesses, you've got the setting up of the temple, the covenant of peace and them turning against them. You have various different views whether or not your tribulation period runs throughout the entire 7 years or whether it's only in the 3.5-year cycle, because each of these things that get set off, one going into the next, going into the next, might be shortened all over it happens in quick succession in a sense. But at the same time it says the time at the end had been shortened because it says otherwise no one else, even the elect won't make it. Okay? And my understanding of that elect is the people that were chosen from the very beginning. This is the time, and again it will bring us back to those things, just reminding you, as the time of Jacob's trouble. It's called Jacob's trouble for a reason. It's not called Israel's trouble, but Jacob's trouble. I think it's dealing very much with the physical seed of Yaakov, dealing very much with Israel, dealing very much with coming up against them for what God has blessed them with after coming back into the land, and very much again because they have been blessed. Their king is reigning with them, and we are going to try and push against everything that they have. Okay? So at the very least, when people mention Gog and Magog, you should ask yourself which one. Are we talking about Revelations 20? Are we talking about Ezekiel? Right? That will give us an indication of what the purpose is, and it might give you an indication of who's going to be around to see it, depending on your theory. Okay. Any questions, any thoughts about it? Okay.
I just wanted to add, like, I wanted to ask, what would you do if someone you knew or like anyone was like watching or playing games or doing something that was completely like it had all of this swearing and blaspheming and stuff.
Yeah.
And you just gave them this look and they're like, look at you and they're like, well, if you look for the sin and everything, the bad and everything, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
So if you say to them, well, actually that's not true, because if you look for the bad in God, you're not going to get it. And then they just like roll their eyes and say whatever and just carry on do whatever they want. How would you like just pray for them or?
Your biggest weapon is Abba. So you can say, God, they don't want to listen to me, you're going to have to intervene. And this, which is a good thing. Remember, it's about salvation at the end of the day. Because if you're justifying sin, okay, you're trying to keep one foot in the world and say you're a believer. Alright? Now our challenge is, in the world, it's very easy to fall into those things because every single, very few, let's say, very few other movies or other series or anything like that is bombarding you with the idea of how you're supposed to look, how you're supposed to act, and if you don't swear in a sentence at least 47 times, you haven't really shared your emotion. Yes, right? But they get to a place where this is normal, right? And they try and justify why it's okay. That's why you get that response of, well, if you look for the sin in everything. You're not looking for gold in a pile of poop. You're going to dig through the soil. That's where you're probably going to find it. You're not going to find it over there. It's the same as people, and it's important. You get to this place where people want to look for their love of their life, and yeah, a lot of them, their first shopping place is sitting in a pub or in a club, and they wonder why, when they find the world, they're like, they just didn't treat me like, they just didn't love me as they should. They just didn't treat. They treated me like a thing. Well, you dressed like a thing. You advertised yourself like a thing. And you went looking for a guy who you knew, you got his attention, not because of who you are. Because of where you were, and what you were saying, by the way you were dressing, etc., etc. Right? People want to justify where they need to draw the line. You as a believer, make sure your lines are drawn, and then you can take to them and you can say, listen, maybe have pull them aside or have a conversation with them and say, look, if God was sitting with you at this very point, do you think it would be offensive to him or make him happy if he sat there listening to what you were listening to? And then if they have any sort of snarky comeback, well, he was there with you anyway, right? So you just need to think about that. We never do. Like I said, I've had people look at me and say, Vince, we didn't want to, out of respect for you, we didn't want to tell you. And unfortunately, I'm talking about in situations where divorce papers weren't finalized and people were getting involved. Without sugarcoating it, you're committing adultery. Yeah, but Vince, out of respect for you, we didn't want to let you know. You worried about my feelings, but you weren't worrying about God's. Somewhere along the line, your theology went skew. This is not what I care about. It's whether or not you acknowledge the fact that God is sitting there in the room with the two of you, and are you saying it's okay? What would he think? Because ultimately that's what Yom Kippur forces you to deal with. It forces you to deal with all of your actions and what would he say or how would he feel knowing that you've done those things. So the best you can really do is kind of point them back to Abba and say, you tell Abba that that's okay, and then if you're happy with that, I'll take a step back, and then you can pray. Right?
So you pray.
Well, I'd ask the question. If God was sitting next to you, would you still be watching that?
Yeah.
And then smile and leave. Yeah, and then pray. Right?
I think sometimes it's not sometimes, 90% of the times we learn about God, but we don't speak to God. And because we don't have that personal relationship with him, we don't care about what he thinks. Because if we're really close to him, he would be our first concern.
And have you guys noticed that for those of you who are married or in a relationship or you deal with your parents or whatever the situation is, a close relationship, you know exactly when your parents don't like certain things and when they do like certain things. You know where that trigger is, don't you? Yeah, and half of your childhood is trying to hide that trigger. No, you don't say it like that. Say it like this, right? Don't pull the trigger. And then when you're married, you realize that your spouse has triggers. And then your kids learn where your buttons are, and they try not to push them. Or when they're annoyed with you, you sit there and they do this in front of you. The point of it is, sometimes there are sensitivities, and those sensitivities come from past hurts and all of those things that you have to deal with, right? But you'll know where they are sensitive to, like, is it my son? Drinking and partying? If my son came out to me and or he says, no, we're going to the mall and I found out he was in a pub. Yeah. Me, I know what goes on in pubs. I won't have that idea of what you're not strong enough. I understand why, because I got hurt when I lived that life. So I want to protect you from it. Right? Ultimately, that's where we're coming from. You need to acknowledge what triggers God. And the best way I can sort of give this to you, if you've been sheltered enough not to have to deal with someone who's suffering from alcoholism, drug abuse, any sort of that picture. I mean, if you've seen any sort of, in some cases movies will depict these guys. They're gaunt, they struggle, they can't function, they're broken, they're foaming at the mouth. All they care about, they don't care who they hurt, they just care about their next fix. That's their motivation. What's going to make me feel better now?
It's like when someone's on a drug addiction.
Yeah, exactly that, right? And they push to get that dealt with. That's the way Yeshua sees sin. That thing that you're allowing into your body is that drug. And you desensitize. See, with a lot of drug users, it starts off as recreational. We only do it when we go out. And we only take the little stuff. And then it starts to develop in, well, if I had a really good time last night, I'll have a good night tonight. And what about on a Wednesday night? We went from drinking on a Thursday night, as student nights, sleeping on a Friday night, drinking on a Thursday night, to having, if you were in a pub, it was going to be Pooza or whatever. You know, they used to say Pooza Thursdays. We did Pooza Mondays. 4 o'clock Tuesday morning, go home, sleep for an hour, shower, go to work, go to the pub. Pooza Tuesday. Wednesday. Pooza Wednesday. And you would go through the cycle. And you were destroying yourself, and you were hurting yourself, and you were doing things that you shouldn't be doing, and you were talking in a way that you shouldn't be doing. And when you look at it, it was about us just getting to the point of our next fix. What was going to help us feel better about whatever situation we wanted to. Yeshua looks at that, and he hates sin because he knows it creates an addiction. You tolerate bad language, you tolerate lust, you tolerate your friends, you tolerate these sort of things coming into your life, coming into your home, and they slowly start to desensitize you to the point where those are normal. You know, it's funny when you work in an industry. I'm in construction. So when you go out onto site, people don't know how to speak without adding 45 syllables of some sort of script. And then I speak to them normally, and then you move on, right? But when you come into fellowship, if I spoke like they did on site, you'll all be traumatized, right? It's the way the world is. I don't have to act that way. I bring my standard, God's standard, and I stand here. And Baruch Hashem, over time, people have learned about who I am and what I do and what I believe. And it's amazing when that happens is they don't swear when they stand in front of me. Or they don't shout at me like they shout at everybody else. Because I'm not that guy. So we just need to become sensitive to Yeshua's trigger and understand why he hates something so much to get to the point where we can take a step back. That's for our safety.
Okay. Now my question is, basically if you buy like Xbox games and things and movies that now have swear words and stuff, you're putting yourself into a position where it will eventually affect on you if you're going to keep watching that stuff and you're going to keep playing that stuff.
Right.
I'm just asking, because you know, my brothers, they bought these violent games, and now all of a sudden they're starting to fight with each other and everything, and then they get me involved in the middle of the fight. Run away.
You do. Yeah, it's quite noted. I mean, when you're looking at it, it's funny when you start to monitor what your kids watch and what you let them play, and as soon as you take away that stimuli, they change. They act differently. They do. It's a very strange thing. And you stop and you go, what was causing that unrest, that anger, that frustration, that normal, well, we're just going to punch things and hit things and shoot things and carry on doing those things. And they actually start to mimic that behavior. You don't even realize it. And as parents, we've had to become more in tune to it because guess what? We grew up in the 80s and if you wanted a drink, your parents bought it for you.
We were desensitized.
Yeah, very quickly. 9 years old, grow up. But now, it's a different situation. You start to see the response, and we can see the blessing of when God says, you need to keep them away from that stuff. But also, we need to equip them to understand why that stuff is bad. I don't need my son to make the mistakes I made. I need to show him the benefit, as well as so when he's out there by himself, he will make the informed decision. He will look at that and he will go, if that's what you're selling, buddy, I don't like it. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. Get you to a point where you understand it, so you don't have to deal with the consequence. Worst case scenario, you sit with a bubbles. Right?
Best case.
Yeah, best case scenario. Well, I never got bubbles, I hear it's pretty bad. But best case scenario, worst case scenario, you're burying a friend. We've had the misfortune of burying guys that were 23 years old after going out with mates. I wasn't there, but he was a mate of ours. We went out, and he left the club like they normally did on a Friday night. And he said, "Guys, I'm going." And for the first time in a long time, they let him. 2 young guys, both drunk, both at the limit. head-on collision, two parents and families in tatters, friends thinking we shouldn't have let him drive, if we only held back, if we only drove him home, if. There were a group of guys that were a year, 2 years behind me, in Boxwood High, 5 guys in a City Golf, 160 k's an hour down at this road. One walked away. I'm talking about the eldest was 19. There are these things where God is looking at you and He goes, listen, I love you, I want to keep you safe. These rules are not just to stop you from missing out on fun. It says, I love you. If you go down this road, it is a very, very big possibility you might not make it till next year. That's the scary. That's what the movies don't tell. That's what the games don't tell. You just reset and carry on.
And you've got multiple lives.
Yeah.
And the problem is, doesn't work in real life. You're broken. And the guy who survived sits there living with the guilt and his friends. He could have stopped that situation by just saying, guys, let's slow down, stop being stupid. I have this continual battle with my DC days mates who have got children while married in many cases and go and drink as hard as what we did then. And I stop and I say to them, you've got to go home to your children. Your wife is waiting for you. And they've got no problem climbing behind the wheel of a car after cruising the whole night. They've pranked their cars. They've hit barriers. They've almost been locked up more than once. And yet they still do it. And others going, how many times do I have to save you before you realize it? This is the challenge. Okay? Become sensitive. Let his heart be molded to yours so that you understand that there is a point where if I become desensitized to him and more sensitive to the world, or I need to be sensitive to him and desensitized to the world. The more I open up that field, and the more I watch, the more I take in, the more I allow myself to dwell on that side, and the more I start to focus more on the world than I do on God. And that's when that little slip happens. And it happens quickly. I can tell you every person here has slipped back into, maybe not all the way back, but into bad habits that started leading them down by one little set of, oh, it's not that bad. And then when you look again, you go, how did I get here? Why am I in this situation again? Why, Abba, do I get stuck with this? Why do you take me through consequence? And that guilt and all that brokenness is because of that love that he would rather smack you and keep you alive than hate you and let you go. Praise God for that consequence, because a lot of people actually came to salvation because of that consequence. We just need to be open to it when it happens. Don't spurn the loving hand of the Father. He's not smacking you because he wants you. He's smacking you because he needs to keep you safe. And that's one thing, and again, parents, you need to instill in your children. Before I give hidings or stern talkings, I will sit down and I look at them and I will say, what are daddies made for? That's what I tell them. You made for hugs. I made for hugs and kisses. But if I need to discipline you, I will. I don't want to. I would rather be giving you kisses and I'd rather be loving you. But if I need to keep you safe and to change this, I'll discipline you.
Me's also the same.
Hmm?
As an accounts for me as well.
This morning to be a taxi
No problem. All right. Any other questions, any other thoughts? All right, let's pray. Frank, we can.
One question, I don't know my phone.
All right, let's pray. Father, we just thank you for this time of fellowship, Lord Father. We thank you for this feast, Lord Father, that we can just celebrate with you. We thank you for the fellowship we've had today, and we thank you for the word that you prepared today. Father, we pray that you would just lead us and guide us, Lord Father, make us sensitive to what breaks your heart, Lord Father. Father, mold us to yours so that we may weep when you weep, rejoice when you rejoice, Lord Father, so we become more like you. We thank you for this family, Lord Father, and we just pray, Lord, for those as we're prepared to go on camp, and for those who are staying behind, Abba, we just pray that you go out before us and come in behind us. And Father, we just thank you that we can just celebrate this Chag again, this time in the season, as you lead us, Lord. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. No. Not Winter.
None on the